The Seattle rain had been falling all morning, soft, steady, unbothered by the people rushing beneath umbrellas. From her office window on the 17th floor of the Remington building, Rachel Morgan watched the gray sky blur into the skyline. She sipped the last of her coffee, the bitterness matching the nerves swirling in her stomach. It was Friday, the kind of Friday where work felt endless and the weekend loomed with obligations instead of rest. Her phone buzzed. Mike. "Hey, love," came his warm voice, steady as always. "Just wanted to check in. Thought I'd pick up Zoe and Ethan from school today. Give you a little breathing room before dinner at your parents' tonight." Rachel exhaled a small laugh, tension loosening just a bit. "You're a saint. Thank you. Try not to stress about tonight, okay?" he added, reading her too easily. "We're there for the kids. It'll be fine." But would it? Rachel forced a smile he couldn't see through the phone. "Yeah, you're right. It'll be fine." She ended the call but stayed seated, staring at the rain tracing lines down the glass. Dinner at her parents' was supposed to be a simple family gathering. Martha and Walter Morgan, her parents, had invited everyone over for a nice home-cooked meal. Her sister Julia, of course, would be there too. Julia always was. Rachel loved her family, she really did. But love didn't erase history. Julia was the oldest, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Even at 40, single and laser-focused on her PR career, Julia still occupied the pedestal their mother had built for her years ago. And Rachel? Rachel, with her stable marriage, two beautiful kids, and a respected career as an architect, somehow always seemed to be the afterthought. The, "Oh, Rachel's here too, daughter." Maybe that was unfair. But after years of small slights, the cuts added up. Like last Thanksgiving when their mother had toasted to Julia's resilience and independence, while Rachel refilled everyone's wine glasses, and not a word was said about the promotion Rachel had earned just the week before. Or the Christmas before that, when Martha's gift for Julia was a weekend spa retreat, while Rachel unwrapped a calendar labeled Family First with a handwritten note. "Maybe this will help you remember to visit more often." It wasn't always like this. Or maybe Rachel had been too young to notice when it started. Either way, tonight felt heavy before it had even begun. The one bright spot? Zoe and Ethan loved seeing their grandparents. Zoe, 8 years old and full of quiet brilliance, couldn't wait to play chess with Grandpa Walter. And Ethan, 5, with his boundless energy and superhero obsessions, was just excited for Grandma's chocolate pudding. Rachel glanced at the clock. Almost 4 p.m. She stood, gathering her things, smoothing down the crease in her blazer. "Big weekend plans?" asked Jenna, one of the junior associates, as they passed each other at the office door. "Family dinner tonight," Rachel replied with a half smile. "You know how that goes." Jenna grinned sympathetically. "Ah, say no more." By the time Rachel pulled into the driveway of her parents' sprawling home in Queen Anne, the rain had softened into a mist. Mike's car was already there, parked neatly in front of the garage. As she stepped out, Zoe came bounding toward her, jacket half zipped, Ethan chasing after her like a rocket. "Mom, Grandpa set up the chessboard already," Zoe called out, eyes bright. Rachel knelt, gathering both kids into her arms. "Sounds like you're ready to win again, huh?" Zoe giggled. Ethan wiggled loose, eager to ring the doorbell even though the door stood slightly ajar. Inside, the warmth of the house wrapped around them. The familiar scent of roasted herbs, lemon, and butter filled the air. A fire crackled softly in the living room. Martha emerged from the kitchen, apron tied neatly around her waist, smile wide, but Rachel noticed the way her mother's gaze bypassed her, landing on Zoe and Ethan. "There's my favorite little chess champ," Martha cooed, arms open for Zoe. "And my big, strong Ethan." The kids rushed into their grandmother's embrace. Behind her, Julia leaned casually against the counter, wine glass in hand. "Well, well," Julia said with a grin. "Look who decided to show up." Rachel smiled, polite. "It's good to see you too, Julia." Walter appeared from the den, his expression softening as he greeted Rachel with a hug. "Glad you made it, kiddo." "Wouldn't miss it," she replied, though the words tasted hollow. As Rachel helped Mike hang the kids' jackets by the door, she caught the exchange between her mother and sister. Low voices, A shared laugh, an easy closeness that pressed like a bruise against Rachel's chest. She bit the inside of her cheek and told herself again, tonight is about family. I'm here for the kids. But in the pit of her stomach, she already felt the weight of being the one who never quite fit at the table. The next morning, the air was crisp as we bundled the kids into the car and headed toward my parents' home. Their place sat on a quiet, tree lined street in a well to do suburb just outside Boston. A house that always seemed just a little too perfect on the outside, like a postcard no one really lived inside. As we pulled up, I spotted my sister Amy's car already in the driveway. No surprise. She lived 10 minutes away and always made a point of getting there early. The golden child, the favorite. And even though I told myself I was past caring about all that, I wasn't. The front door opened before we even knocked. My mom, wearing one of her signature cream colored cashmere sweaters, greeted the kids with open arms, her smile as bright as ever. But her eyes barely glanced at me. Oh, Ellie, Tom, my little darlings, come here, she cooed, sweeping them into a hug as they bounded toward her. Behind her stood Amy, wine glass already in hand at noon. Her hair was freshly done, makeup flawless, looking every bit like the cover of a lifestyle magazine. She gave me that tight little smile that said, I'm playing nice, but we both know where we stand. It's been a while, Jenna, Amy said smoothly, leaning in for the kind of hug that feels more like checking for weapons than affection. Yeah, it has, I replied, matching her smile, even as my chest tightened. Inside, my dad was in his favorite chair, the kids immediately circling him like planets around the sun. I kissed his cheek and caught the quick glance he exchanged with my mom. The same look they always gave when Amy entered the room. The unspoken she's the one who stayed, the one who didn't disappoint. We moved into the kitchen and that's when I noticed it. The menu. Lasagna. The way Amy liked it. Her favorite kale salad with roasted almonds and goat cheese. Chocolate souffle for dessert. Not a single dish I had ever mentioned enjoying. Not even the garlic bread I always loved since I was a kid. I tried not to let it show, took a breath, smiled. Need help with anything, Mom? I offered. Oh no, honey. Amy and I already handled the menu, she chirped without turning around. Amy's laugh followed like nails tapping against glass. Yeah, we planned everything last weekend. Thought it'd be fun. I stood there, the outsider in the house I grew up in, watching my mother and sister work together like the perfect team. And even though I knew I shouldn't expect anything different, the sting of it still caught me off guard. Family dinners weren't supposed to feel like this, like a contest I hadn't even signed up for. Ellie wandered into the kitchen, her wide eyes catching the tension faster than I could bury it. Kids always notice. They may not understand every word, but they feel the weight in the room. Mom, Ellie whispered, tugging at my sleeve. Why does Grandma always smile more at Aunt Amy? I knelt down beside her, smoothed her hair, and said the only thing I could. Sometimes grown-ups forget how to share their love the right way. Ellie nodded like she understood more than I gave her credit for. She gave my hand a little squeeze before running off to find her brother. I stayed there for a second longer, listening to the clink of wine glasses, the laughter between my mom and Amy, and the silence they left for me. The dinner table buzzed with easy conversation, but I felt like a stranger looking in from the outside. The warmth of the room did little to soften the chill sitting heavy in my chest. My mother poured wine into Laura's glass with that familiar bright smile. Your favorite Cabernet, she said. Then she turned to me, almost as an afterthought. Betsy, I couldn't find the white you like. Hope red is fine. Of course, I answered, smiling politely. Anything is fine. But it wasn't fine. Not really. As the plates were being set, I noticed the spread. Chocolate mousse for dessert, Laura's favorite. Roasted vegetables, not garlic bread. No cheesecake. Every dish felt like a quiet reminder of where I stood. Or rather, where I didn't. It wasn't new. These small omissions had become familiar over the years, so subtle they almost didn't register. But tonight, the pattern felt loud. Laura sat beaming, recounting her latest work triumphs. Her recent ad campaign, apparently the talk of the Boston scene. My mother chimed in, proud and glowing. She's so creative. I always knew Laura would make a mark. My father nodded along, calling her our little star. I lifted my glass toward my sister. Congratulations, I said. My voice stayed even, but something inside me pulled tight. They didn't ask about my career, my recent promotion, the successful launch of 3 best-selling books under my direction. No mention of the division I'd built nearly from scratch. Instead, my father turned to me with a pleasant smile. So, Betsy, how's Ellie's chess club going? Ellie, sitting nearby, perked up at the mention of her name. She just won her first tournament, I replied, doing my best to keep the sting out of my voice. That's wonderful, my father said, nodding. It should have felt good. It did in a way, but I couldn't help noticing the difference in tone. How the weight of my own achievements always seemed to shrink beneath the shadow of my sister's. And maybe that wouldn't have mattered so much if I hadn't overheard what I heard next. I stepped away from the table to use the bathroom. As I walked quietly down the hall, voices drifted from the kitchen. My mother, my sister. Betsy missed so many career chances because she had kids. My mother's voice floated through the doorway. She could have been editor-in-chief by now. Laura chuckled. Well, I'm lucky. I don't have to juggle all of that. I can focus on my career. That's what I wanted, my mother replied, her tone soft, almost wistful. A life that's your own. I stood frozen, my back pressed against the hallway wall. I shouldn't have listened, but I couldn't move. The words sliced deeper than they should have. They weren't even cruel, just honest. Honest in the worst kind of way. The truth laid bare between them. My choices, my life, seen as limitations instead of accomplishments. Motherhood as a weakness. My work invisible, my role sidelined. I forced myself to breathe. In, out, steady. When I returned to the table, I smiled. I sat down, I ate my meal, but my hands felt colder than they should, and my heart heavier. Greg noticed, of course, he always did. He reached under the table, giving my hand a quiet squeeze. I smiled back at him, grateful, but I couldn't meet his eyes for long. If I did, I might not be able to hold the mask in place. I looked at Ellie, folding napkins beside me with the careful patience of an 8-year-old who already understood more about human feelings than she should. She leaned closer, whispering, Mom, are you okay? I nodded. I'm fine, sweetheart. But the lie tasted bitter on my tongue. Because the truth was, my heart was breaking quietly, and not for the first time. Betsy returned to the dining table, forcing a polite smile as the conversation continued circling around Laura's achievements. The steak on her plate sat barely touched, though her stomach ached more from anxiety than hunger. The kids were chatting quietly at their end of the table, Ellie casting glances toward her mother every so often, her sharp young eyes not missing a beat. Then it happened. Laura, mid-conversation, suddenly pressed her hand to her chest. Ugh, I feel really hot, she muttered, her face flushing bright red. Martha leaned forward, concern wrinkling her brow. Honey, are you all right? Laura nodded faintly, but her breathing was growing shallow. She clutched at her chair for balance. I just feel dizzy. I think I need to lie down. Greg stood immediately, moving to support her as she tried to rise. Betsy's fork fell onto her plate with a soft clang as panic prickled at the back of her neck. What's happening? Walter stood too, gesturing toward the kitchen. Get her some water. But before anyone could move, Ellie's small voice cut through the tension like a knife. Grandma, she said softly, isn't it strange that Aunt Laura is feeling sick? When that powder you sprinkled was supposed to be on Mom's steak? The room froze. Betsy's heart stopped. Martha's face went white. What are you talking about, Ellie? Walter's voice cracked with confusion. Ellie looked between the adults, her face innocent but steady. I saw Grandma in the kitchen. She put white powder on the biggest steak and said, "This is for Betsy." But I switched the steaks when I went to get my water. I gave that one to Aunt Laura instead. The words hit the table like a thunderclap. Laura's face twisted between pain and shock. Greg's eyes widened as he instinctively pulled her closer, supporting her as she swayed on her feet. Mom? Betsy's voice was barely a whisper. Is is this true? Martha stood frozen, her lips quivering, but no words coming out. Say something, Walter's voice boomed, his hands clenched into fists on the table. Martha's eyes welled with tears. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally collapsed into the dining chair, her head in her hands. It it was supposed to just be a laxative, she stammered. I didn't mean, I just wanted you to miss dinner, to feel a little sick, so Laura could. So I could what? Laura's voice rose, breathless with fury. So I could shine? So I could be the star daughter for one dinner? Martha's tears spilled over as she nodded, breaking down completely. You don't understand. Betsy has everything. The career, the husband, the beautiful family. I just, I just wanted to give you one night where it was your moment. Silence fell so heavy you could hear the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Betsy sat, numb, her mind racing between rage, disbelief, and the horrible ache of betrayal. We're not rivals, she finally managed to say, her voice shaking. We're sisters. Walter's chair scraped back as he stood, his face drained of color. 40 years, Martha. 40 years, and this is what you've become? Martha wept openly now, gripping the edge of the table as if it might keep her from falling apart. I never wanted to hurt anyone, she sobbed. Ellie quietly leaned into her mother's side, whispering, I didn't know if I did the right thing, but I was scared. Betsy pulled her daughter into her arms, hugging her tightly. You were brave, Ellie. You did exactly the right thing. Greg helped Laura to the couch, fetching her a glass of water, while Walter paced the room in stunned silence. Finally, Laura spoke, her voice flat. Mom, this wasn't love. This was manipulation, and it could have killed someone. Martha's sobs deepened, but no one rushed to comfort her, because no one could. The damage had been done, and there was no taking it back. The steak had barely cooled on the plate when the first sign of trouble appeared. Laura's face flushed deep red. At first, Betsy thought it might just be the wine. But then came the rapid breathing, the sheen of sweat on her forehead, and the shaky hand that gripped the edge of the table. I I feel strange, Laura muttered, her voice tight. Concern rippled across the table as Walter leaned in. Laura, are you okay? Martha immediately stood, hovering over her daughter. Maybe it's the wine, she offered quickly, though her tone sounded off. Too rushed, too defensive. Greg moved instinctively, placing a steadying hand on Laura's back. Do you need to lie down? Betsy stood too, worried, but unsure what was happening, until Ellie's small, clear voice cut through the confusion. Grandma, that's strange, Ellie said, her eyes wide, innocent but direct. Why is Aunt Laura sick from the steak you put powder on? The room froze. Every head snapped toward Ellie, who sat calmly at the table, her hands folded in her lap. What are you talking about, sweetie? Walter asked, confusion tightening his brow. Ellie pointed at the steak. I saw Grandma sprinkle white powder on Mom's steak in the kitchen, so I switched it with Aunt Laura's when I went to get my water. Silence. Absolute, crushing silence. Laura's hand trembled as she set down her fork, her eyes locking onto her mother. Mom? Is that true? Martha's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Betsy felt the air thicken around her, pressing against her chest. She looked at Ellie, whose little face held no malice, only concern. The kind of raw, childlike instinct that knows when something is wrong, even if it can't explain why. Mom, Betsy whispered, staring at Martha. Please tell me she's wrong. But Martha's silence was its own answer. Walter pushed back from the table so abruptly his chair scraped loudly against the hardwood. His face twisted between shock and fury. Martha, what the hell did you do? It was just... Martha's voice cracked as she tried to find words. It was just a laxative, nothing dangerous. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just wanted Betsy to slow down, to give Laura a chance to shine. The words fell like broken glass onto the floor. Laura gasped, struggling to stand. Greg was already helping her steady herself, his eyes hard as stone. You did this to your own daughter? Martha's hands shook as she reached toward Laura, who recoiled. I didn't mean it to go this far, Martha sobbed. I only wanted to humiliate me. Betsy finished the sentence for her, her voice trembling with hurt more than anger. To make me the weak one, to make Laura feel like the strong one. No, Betsy, that's not. Martha choked on the words. Walter was standing now, his hand planted on the table as if to keep himself from falling. 40 years, Martha. 40 years, and I never once imagined you were capable of something like this. Laura, now visibly shaking but standing on her own, stared at her mother with tears brimming in her eyes. I didn't ask for this. I never wanted this. The children sat silently, wide-eyed. Ellie's hand slowly reached across the table to hold Tom's. Betsy turned to Ellie, kneeling beside her chair, tears slipping down her face. You were so brave, sweetheart, she whispered. You saved me. Ellie leaned into her mother's arms, nodding but looking confused. I just didn't want you to get sick. Martha collapsed into a chair, head in her hands, sobbing, but no one moved to comfort her. The weight of betrayal hung thick in the room, heavier than any of them could bear. Greg's voice broke the silence. Calm, measured, but sharp. We need to take the remaining stakes. They need to be tested. Martha lifted her head, eyes swollen, mouth open as if to protest. But she said nothing. Walter stood frozen, staring at the table, his fists clenched at his sides. I think we're done here, Betsy said quietly, gathering Tom and Ellie close. We're going home. Laura leaned on Greg for support, wiping the sweat from her brow, still pale but steadier. Martha's sobs echoed behind them as Betsy led her children out the door, her husband and sister close behind. No one looked back. The months after that night weren't easy. The trust that had shattered between Betsy and her mother couldn't be glued back with a single apology or a few counseling sessions. Healing doesn't work that way. But Betsy didn't shut the door completely. There were guarded conversations, careful visits, a distance but not abandonment. The children still saw their grandparents under Betsy's watchful eye because Ellie's words stayed with her. Real families protect each other. Martha, too, began to face her own reflection in therapy. She admitted to holding resentment, to misdirecting her need for control into her daughters' lives. She acknowledged that what she'd called love had often been control dressed as care. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not fully, but it was the first step. One quiet evening, watching Ellie and Tom playing outside, Betsy realized something important. Standing up for herself wasn't about punishing her mother. It was about breaking the pattern. So her own children would never have to question their worth. Sometimes the strongest way to love your family in Watts is to stop letting them hurt you. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose peace, even if you have to build it yourself.